guys, Danny Johnson here. I just want to do a small walkthrough on some of the things that we thought about when we were building our house, show you how they turned out, and basically just make this video for somebody who might be considering building their own house or designing things, doing a restoration, that kind of thing. There's a lot to consider, and I really put a lot of time into this with my wife. We thought about this a lot. It's not the first house that we've built together, so we had some things going into it that we knew for sure were a good idea, and other things that came along the way. So just wanted to share some of the little things that we did, and hope that it makes a useful video for somebody who's considering building a house. Go ahead and put in the comments if you have any thoughts on it. Maybe some of the things that you've done in the past that you enjoyed, or some things you wish you would have done to your house, that kind of thing. But anyway, thanks for watching. We'll just get started with the video here and just show you some of the things that we considered as we were building. Now, something that we did that was kind of funny is I actually went out to the lot that we had and I took a picture of the lot. Then I took the actual plans that they had given us for the home and I cut them out and pasted them on the picture of the lot. Then I went through and I drove around the neighborhood and I found the color of the other houses that I liked and colored the house in that color, added the rock that we liked, the roof tiles, everything like that. So what you're looking at here at the top is actually a computer generated image of the home before it was built. As you can see, I even put my cars in the garage. And after deciding all that, I then it made it a lot easier to kind of see how the layout of the house is going to work, even with the view of the mountains in the background that we really wanted. So below I've posted the picture that you're starting to see now of how the house actually turned out, and it was pretty close. But it was a lot of fun to do. It helped kill some of the time that we had to wait for the house to be done, and it also helped us understand what the house might look like. So this was all done on simple Photoshop, paint, and so maybe you can do something like that too. Now, something a lot of people don't think about at first is the placement of their house on the lot. Pay attention how much room there is between my house, which is in the middle, and the houses on each side of me, as well as I'll show you here in a video clip how much room they're left with because they moved their houses to the other side of their lot. You can see how lucky we are that we got so much space between our house and the neighbor's house on both sides. And that's because the neighbors decided to put their houses to the far sides of their lot, and we put ours right in the middle. So they're actually really close to their neighbors, both sides. And our house ended up right in the middle with a lot of room on each side. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about floors. Floors are actually a very big decision to make when you're building your home. And some of the things you may not think about, which I want to bring up, are your baseboards and your trim. Because it's very easy to say, well, later on down the road we'll put a different floor in that we like. And you can do that, but just remember that you may have to rip up your baseboards to have the floor fit under it, or you're going to have it basically butt up against the floorboards. So that's ripping a whole bunch of floorboards apart. And as we get into that, let's also mention the trim that goes around the door. If your home like this one has an option from the builder to do an upgraded trim, then that's something that also may be different when you go to a different baseboard, or it's something that you may have to rip out again in order to get the floor under it. So this is a laminate, and it's held up. I had the same one in my last house, and we really like it a lot. They do make a lot of tile now that looks like wood, which is also kind of nice. But something to mention with that is tile is very cold, which is nice in the summertime. But if you're walking around barefoot otherwise, it's very, very cold. And so I like this floor because it's cool. It's not really too cold in the wintertime. You can still walk around barefoot. And it cleans up like a hardwood wood clean up, or like a tile would clean up almost. So anyway, that's something to consider about floors. Also, in regards to the floor, something very important is the garage floor. And so this has been coated with the Rust-Oleum polycuramine. It's basically an epoxy. And that's something that I would strongly recommend doing as soon as you're moving into a new house. It's very unlikely that you'll ever have your garage completely cleaned out again, except for before you move into a house and basically when you move out. So doing this is a huge benefit. It reduces all kinds of grime buildup, and it's easy to clean. And for me, if you've seen this channel, I do a lot of repairs on cars on this, and it wipes up real clean. And it's definitely a must-do if you're considering moving into a house. And I do have install and review videos on that, and I'll post that in the description. But it's definitely something I would strongly recommend, is coating the floors. Okay, garage lighting is also one that's very important. Most people only have just the light for their actual garage door opener and maybe one other small light. But as you can see in here, I spend a lot of time in the garage, and it's good to add a few strip lights in here, and also outlets for the walls is another very important thing. Okay, the can lights are also very important for lighting. It's not even dark outside, you can see here, but the normal light provides just this much light. It's just the dome light. And then the can lights, as you see when they come on, create a huge difference there, as you can tell. They really light up the room. You want to have about 4 of them in each room, 1 per corner. Okay, I want to talk about counters for a minute. Counter space is very important, both if you need it for sitting down and serving people, preparing food, or just having room to work on other things. And one thing I want to mention here, as you can see on our island, is we've set the sink intentionally off to the left-hand side. And the reason why is because we wanted all this counter space, especially for when we bring groceries in. We'll bring everything in, and you'll find that you want to set it down here to put it in the refrigerator. And the way that this model actually comes, the sink's all the way over here, and so it really puts the sink right in the middle of what you're trying to do. Also, same thing when you're pulling milk out of the refrigerator or something, you're setting it down right behind you instead of having to walk it all the way around. So that's just another tip there. Cabinets, of course, you can't go wrong with cabinets. The more the better. And a pantry is always good, but that's going to depend on the model of the house. What we also did here is we double stacked the granite. So it's actually supposed to be half that thickness. And so you can pay a little more for them to make it appear thicker. And so it really isn't a thicker slab. They've just added a second layer all the way around it. But it really gives a nice thick look to it. And so that's something to consider as well. Okay, windows are a huge thing to consider. And as you can see here, all of our windows line up towards the top. When we actually first came in, they had framed that door so it was down here. Sorry, you can't really see because of the shadow, but we had all these big windows and then a small door, so that's something to consider. But you know, big windows are a definite plus if you have a nice view. On the other hand, if all you're looking at is a block wall outside the back, or you know, your neighbor's house, and maybe windows aren't going to be for you. But for us, we went with these big 6-foot windows all the way across the back, and very happy that we did that. I want to talk about the ceiling fan for a minute, and it's something that's very often overlooked because people think I'll just put a fan in later, and that's what we did as well, as we put the ceiling fan in later. However, we did plan for it, and that's important because ceiling fans can get pretty heavy, especially if you have one like this. So what you have to do is make sure that they install the anchoring system in there, so when it comes time to installing the fan, you have a place to mount the hardware for the fan. If it was just a light in that place and you decided, oh, we're going to replace the light for a ceiling fan, you may have to work to get brackets that will attach to the joists and do all kinds of things. So you want to be very careful about that and decide where you're going to eventually have ceiling fans, You don't have to pay for them up front like we did. You can put them in later, but you definitely want the mounting brackets to be in place. And with that said, we've also pre-wired all the switches so that they will accept the ceiling fan and do what you need it to do. Okay, ceiling height is something that's very important and often overlooked as well. These are 9-foot ceilings, so they're up there pretty tall. And that really makes a big difference, and especially if you have a second level, as we do here. These are also 9-foot ceilings upstairs. And doing that's important for a few reasons. One, it just helps you feel like you have a lot more space. Two, if you're going to put in big windows like this one has, the size of the window is going to be limited by how big the roof is. So when we told them we wanted these big 5-foot tall windows, these big 5x5s, that's when they asked us if we wanted to change from an 8-foot ceiling to a 9-foot ceiling. And it didn't cross my mind until then, but then I understood that if this were only an 8-foot ceiling, you cannot have a 5-foot window. We could have, just because of the way the roof line comes in, we would have had to make it a smaller window. So 9-foot ceilings upstairs is very important. As you can see here as well, this is a pretty long room, and if you have 9-foot ceilings, it makes it seem like a big open space, whereas an 8-foot ceiling gives it that tunnel vision kind of a look. Now carpet's something that's very important as well, and it kind of goes back to that whole baseboard type thing that I was saying earlier. A lot of people will opt for cheap carpet and decide that they're going to put it in later, some better carpet, but if they do that, it's going to pretty much all be out of pocket where it could have just been part of your loan. Where we were looking at our carpet, we went through that and we thought, well, should we get a cheaper carpet up front and then pay for it out of pocket later? And all in all, it's a lot easier to have everything done with your home rather than have to go back and redo it. You don't want to be pulling apart brand new baseboards. You don't want to be pulling out new carpet and having the inconvenience of other people coming and reinstalling carpet later. And you have to consider as well the base price of the carpet you're already putting up. So when you throw carpet away, you very rarely can resell it for nearly what you're already invested in it. So you might as well just pay the extra amount and get the upgraded carpet. Now we built this house on this lot specifically for the view. That's what we were going after. Well, what's funny is, we added these big 5x5 windows out the back, so, because the view was our main focus. But what's funny is that this floor plan did not come with one window on the back wall upstairs. And so, another thing we had done is added other windows, and sometimes you can't even see out of these, unless you get up. And so, but the point is, adding windows can really open up rooms. And so it just brings in a lot of natural light and gives you just a lot different of a feel for that room and for the house. So we'll talk about the countertops now. We went in and handpicked the granite slab that we wanted. That way we knew the exact stone we were getting. It wasn't going to be a mystery. We weren't going to hope that it was good. And they charged us a fee for that, but it was well worth it because we knew for the extra money we were putting into granite, we were going to get what we wanted exactly. So with that said, this house has the same granite throughout the entire house. Every bathroom has the same granite. It's all matching, and that's very nice. That was something that was a little difficult to decide if we wanted to do it afterwards and go with the cheaper counters up front. But once again, there's a few benefits. One, it's more convenient this way. They don't have to come back through and rip open your house and open Pandora's box and tear out everything that was already there. It's not going to be an out-of-pocket expense since it'll be included in your loan already. And you have to think about if you have people coming through and ripping out your counters, are they also going to damage the drywall behind it and then have to fix that? So in the end, we decided to put the same granite throughout the kitchen, the bathrooms, everything, and very happy that we did. Now, as I mentioned earlier, can lights are very important, and upstairs all we did was just the one light for some of these bedrooms, and you can tell how dark it is. It's something that starts to add up when you're putting it down on your price sheet, but in the end it's worth it to do it and just have it done. You can go back through and you can run wires to each corner and drill holes, and you can add can lights afterwards. So that is an option still, but when it's all said and done, sometimes it's just easier and better off just to do it from the beginning. Something else that's very important to think about, and I haven't gotten to this yet, but towel rack holders. A lot of newer homes use a very thin drywall, and so towels, towel rack holders are just going to rip right through it. So when this home was being built, we came through and we added extra wood. We took a range from about here to here, and then we just added nice big 2x4s through there. So now we can go through with our stud finder and we can add our towel holders. That's something that you should definitely think of ahead of time. In this case, for the bathroom, the toilet paper holder will go just into the cabinet, so it really wasn't that hard here. But downstairs in the master, it has just walls on each side, and so we also had gone through and put the other wood inside the walls, and so that's really important. That's something a lot of people don't think of till after the fact. Also, a very good thing to consider is the air conditioning system in the home. This home actually has 2 different thermostats, one upstairs and one downstairs, and 2 different AC units. And the last house we had was similar to this one. It was 2 stories, but it only had 1 air conditioning unit. And so the problem with that is we only had 1 thermostat, and that was upstairs. So not only did we have to run upstairs to change the thermostat if it was getting too hot or cold, but the entire house had to be the same temperature. And so, as heat rises, for example, we were basically cooling the whole entire house, even if we were mostly spending time just in the bottom level. So this is very nice because you can change the temperature upstairs and downstairs to your liking. And if you have guests that come over like we did the other night, we were able just to tell them to put the air conditioning wherever they wanted because it wasn't going to affect us. I want to talk about storage for a minute. This is very important. And as you can see here, we have double doors, and it makes it very convenient to get into these closets and to get into the whole range of what you need to fill in. And so I'm going to show you here in one of the bedrooms why that can be a bad thing if you don't have the double doors. And this is something my wife regrets, because if you come in to the bedrooms, you're going to want to tell them to install a double door instead of a single. Because when you open this single door, it's very hard to get items all the way into that end and turn around and come and get items all the way out of that end. So when you open the door, you're going to be met with your clothing probably from here to here, and anything that you need that's way back in here is difficult to get to. And so that's just something that's important to think about if you're having the house framed in. If you're deciding on closet doors, the double doors come in handy quite a bit. Okay, something very important to consider as well is the radiant barrier. So that's the back side of the roof here, and this has that aluminum looking stuff, and that's very important to help reduce your costs. It really does a good job for keeping the heat out, and in the summertime, and keeping it in the wintertime. And of course, that also goes without saying, is the blow-in insulation. Whatever you can do to better insulate your attic area is going to be worth the cost in the long run. Also, along the lines of the insulation, between all of the studs, we also have insulation, and usually they do that on the outside walls of the house, and so that's pretty common. But we've also added it in between the different rooms, and that's important if you have your house set up to where your living room is very close to your bedroom and that kind of thing. So adding insulation really pays off as well. not only on the outside of the house, and with the outside of the house you can also get into like the foam insulation and some other things too, but depending on your climate, it's a very good idea. We also added these stair lights going up the stairs, which comes in handy, and we have these, so they're on basically one of those photo cells, so when it gets dark, see if I can get it dark enough to read this, it'll come on, as you can see, and then when it's light enough they come off, so that's pretty convenient. The only thing is on the stairs like this, you'll find that it might be brighter downstairs than upstairs, so you'll have the middle one on and then the other ones are not on, and so sometimes it looks kind of funny, but these are pretty nice. And as you can see here, as you push on them, they can go brighter and brighter, or off, or dim. And so, you know, when we had people staying over, we just would come over and turn these to their brightest setting so that nobody tripped and fell down the stairs. So that's also something to consider. It's really hard to bite the bullet on this one, but the railing is a somewhat expensive upgrade, but it really, I think it's really great for basically the presentation of the house. Really makes it feel a lot better as well, and you know, it's a nice touch as you go and use the stairs each day. It's common just to have the standard pole that just goes up the top here, but having the actual railing and the knoll post and some of the decorative rod, I think it really adds a nice touch to the home, and it's something that you're going to look at basically every day, just depending on the setup, and of course kitty cats like to play with it too, so kind of comes in handy. You have to excuse the construction noise, they're putting that park in behind us. But another thing that's important are floodlights in your backyard, and these are all actually switched to a switch in the master bedroom as well as here in the living room, so if you hear anything you can flip the switch and light up the whole backyard. Now also something I wanted to go over was a security system, and we have that throughout the house, and we added outlets throughout the house on the eaves, and we added some that are hot, or meaning they're always on for security cameras, and then we also added some other outlets for Christmas lights, and there's a switch for that in the garage. So here's our garage switch here. These are for the lights here inside the garage, and then right next to it, this is the Christmas tree, or sorry, the Christmas lights for the eaves, and that's very handy, so you don't have to plug the lights in manually all the time. So when it comes Christmas time, we put up all the lights, and then you simply flip the switch on or off depending on how you want it. Something else that isn't thought about often are your garage door switches. And it's actually pretty funny because when you walk into a lot of houses, you'll notice that they have these stacked one on top of the other. It must be easier to do it that way. So we specifically asked them to set these up so that this controlled the right door and this controlled the left door. And so that's just something important that you might want to stress, because you know, how many times have we hit the wrong switch? You know, in our last house it was like that, and we got used to it, but anyway, it's just one small thing to keep in mind that makes it nice to just have the proper switches and in their proper places for the corresponding doors. Now, more on light switches. You'll see how many there are for this entry hall area and living room area, and we were lucky that when we were building this house, the model for this house happened to be the same model. So basically the builder had a fully built house that you could walk through to see what their homes were like, and it happened to be the same floor plan. And so we were able to walk through, and we were actually, we found it pretty funny, some of the setup that they had of what would turn on which light. And so something we did is we paid for the electrical walkthrough, and so they allowed us to come through and tell them where we wanted our switches and what we wanted those switches to power. And so for example, this hallway right here had a switch behind me where we just were to turn the hallway on, and I thought that was funny, so we had them move it over here so that as you're walking down this hallway you can use the actual switch that should turn those lights on. And so what I did is I actually came through this house at night when it was framed, right before they did their electrical walkthrough, and I took sticky notes with me, and I walked around the house in the dark, and I put a sticky note everywhere I wanted them to put a switch and what I wanted that switch to turn on. And so that worked out really well, and this is a prime example. This switch here actually turns on the lights inside our office. We're still organizing this, sorry, it'll be a little bit of a mess. But as you can see, if you were to open this door, you would cover the light switch on that side, and if you were to open this door, you'd cover the light switch on that side. So it actually made it much easier and made a lot more sense to put this switch on the outside where it won't cause any problems unless you're playing a trick on somebody. Now the front door is something very important, and I'm still somewhat upset about it because I wanted a much wider door. You'll notice that couches and refrigerators and washers and dryers and all kinds of things, you know, with everything that comes into a house, even though a lot of times you only move it in and out when you're moving in and when you're finally moving out, you know, they all have to go through this front door, and it's pretty skinny. So I was opting for a bigger, wider door, and I think I was overruled by my wife. I can't remember what had happened, but she wanted just the traditional door for cosmetics. But anyway, a wider front door is something to consider, or at least put in a bigger sliding rear door or something so that you can get your furniture in. And just as a side note, my wife was also real big on painting our front door this nice blue color, tealish greenish, whatever you'd call it. And it actually looks pretty nice, so I gotta hand it to her. Some things are a little less significant, like adding a a soap dispenser, the air switch for the disposal. Those are things that you can come back and do later, but it's something you want to think about, especially, in our case, we were putting in this specific countertop and this granite slab that we wanted to be perfect, so we had to really think out. And in this case also, you want to make sure that that is far enough away, because in our last house, when you would turn this on, it would actually hit this because they had drilled that other hole really close to the to this handle, and so what they had to do is flip this around this way so that it wouldn't hit. So there are ways around it as well if people do mess up, but this was something that my wife spent probably hours on deciding, do I want the soap on this side, how far away, and we gave them the specifications of where we wanted everything drilled. Also, something to mention about the sink, we love having this big single sink. The days are kind of gone where you, well, at least for us, where you fill up one side with soapy water and the other with rinse water, and soap one up, rinse it, and then dry it. We've enjoyed having this bigger sink. It's just come in handy a lot more, and we just wash everything, soap it all up and spray it off and sprinkle it off, really, with the sprayer on here. And I think we've saved more water than the traditional method, but having one big sink is something important to consider. Now, all these poles, or these little knob handles, whatever you want to call them, that's something else to think about, because it's something you can easily say, well, we'll go back and we'll change it, we'll add these later. But you have to think, what if they drilled the single hole right in the middle for the knob, and then you come back and you want to add one that's like this? So, that's something to think about as well, and cabinets aren't cheap. Replacing all of them, or, having them look, all messy with a bunch of holes is also something that you're not going to want to have. Okay, when considering the oven, something that's actually come up quite often, we've sold a few homes, is that a lot of people have their preference whether they want gas or electric. So if you're building, it's a very good idea, especially even if you don't think you'll sell your home, you might. So it's a good idea to run both of the plumbing for gas and electric for your appliances, because you may not believe it, but some people will literally have it be a deal breaker if they come through and you don't have a gas setup and they wanted, you know, a gas powered kitchen. On the counters here, if you're gonna seat people, something to think about is that overhang. You want to have enough overhang that the chairs sit underneath it. And this is even probably more of a bad example than a good example. But you know, you have these pieces here that kind of hit your knees when you try to go in here. So something we may do in the future, or something you can consider, is just having a post on the very end to give you that added support. Because otherwise, if this doesn't have enough overhang, then you really can't get it underneath it and have a comfortable place to eat. Okay, something else to think about when we get into the laundry area is adding cabinets. These come in handy so much. You open it up and you have all your dish soap and your softener and all kinds of stuff, and it makes a nice clean look for the house, and it's really not going to cost too much more. And odds are, you know, if somebody's already doing the cabinets for your house, they can just order a few more and put them in here. Also, something I want to mention about the laundry room, believe it or not, this is one of the main reasons we chose this floor plan, and that's because this has the laundry downstairs. Our last house had the laundry upstairs, and we had to keep going upstairs to do it. And my wife decided that was one of the main things, enough that she, you know, we ended up selling the other house. It was one of the main considerations, she wanted to have the laundry near the master or even downstairs. So as you look over floor plans, especially in our case, we looked for the laundry downstairs, and we also looked for how many bedrooms there were downstairs, because as you may be having children soon or already have children, that's going to be a big factor to you. If some houses have all the bedrooms upstairs other than the master, you know, that could be a problem for you. Also, if you do have the laundry upstairs and the master's downstairs, for example, that's something you can look into, is have them plumb the lines to add another washer and dryer right into your master closet. It's becoming very, very common on a lot of floor plans these days, and it's something that is very, very convenient to have a second laundry room. Of course, you know, that means you're going to have to buy a second washer and a second dryer. So, you know, for some other reasons, I'm sure a lot of people don't do that. All right, let's talk about this big expensive guy here. This is our water softener, and it was, I think, just over $1,000, maybe even a little more. And that's something that's really hard to front the money for up front, but when you have it in, you realize how much of a benefit it is. Where we live, there's a lot of hard water, and the problem with that is, as you turn on the sinks, you'll notice over time you get a lot of that calcium buildup that's coming, you know, clogging your sinks, your brand new, you know, spouts on your sinks and everything. And it's a really fast way to take out your other appliances if you have water in your refrigerator, your dishwasher, you know, all kinds of things. So a water softener system is very important, and it just has the little hopper here that we fill up full of salt. And this was one of the bigger, better ones, and so we went with it, but I can say it's worth the investment. Also, water heater. We have just one, but we have a good, decent sized one, and it seems to be doing the trick. Second water heater is something that you can add a little bit later, but another thing to go along with this is we saw a lot of floor plans that had the water heater inside the house and upstairs, and we didn't want that risk of it ever bursting and flooding the entire house, so it's here in the garage where the builder does the majority of them. And that way, if it were to leak, it would just go out the garage. I want to talk about this third car bay here. In our last house, we made the door bigger. Unfortunately, with this floor plan, this is the integrity of the home here. You have a big post, so we couldn't really spread that door out anymore, and so it's a smaller size door. But something that you really want to consider is what they consider to be a regular car door. This is the one car portion here, and you know, we've gotten used to it and we squeeze in. And on this side, we've actually expanded that door another few feet. So it's a really big opening and makes it a lot easier for working on the cars and moving stuff around. But if you're gonna have a third car bay, you really wanna consider how wide that door is. I really liked having our last house with that extra oversized door. This may not apply to too many people, but I really enjoy having my big air compressor, and it runs off the 220 volt. And so we had them install that, and that's something that you want to discuss with your electrician and everything ahead of time so that you have your plug for that. And just by comparison, in my last home, the 220 volt was up front with the air compressor. And I found that I was just slinging all the air hoses to the back of the garage because I was filling up bike tires or filling up the neighbor's car or doing whatever. And so in this one, I actually moved and had them put the 220 volt in the back corner, or actually the front corner, rather. And that's been a lot better. I've been able to have a lot better access to it. And we extended the garage out a bit so the air compressor fits back in there and it's not in the way when you try to drive in. But that's something that we had in the last house. So that's something to consider if you're going to have any kind of bigger power supply needs. Make sure you think about where that 220 volts going to go. And as you can see here, we also extended the garage quite a bit. So we have a lot of extra room. The toolboxes, you can open up the drawers and you're not even coming, you know, near the cars, where my last one was, you know, was pretty bad. But this one, I can open up these drawers all the way and I still have plenty of room between the car, where the last one had to be up against that wall. So talk to your builder about garage extensions. Even a few feet deeper and a few feet wider really makes a big difference. And so that's something that I've really enjoyed. Next, let's talk about under the stairs. A lot of houses have storage space under the stairs like this, but it's very funny. You'll see a lot of them don't want to go to the effort to frame it all in and drywall it, so they will actually have it end prematurely. So you want to talk to the builder about framing it all the way down as far as they can go with it so that you get the maximum amount of room there. We've also added a light in here, and that's become very helpful. I wanted to bring up the sink here in the guest bathroom. This is downstairs. Now this was a full-size bathroom, so it already came with a full shower and everything, so this was big. However, our last house, all this was one of those pedestal sinks where it was just the white sink and it just dropped down to a post. That's what was standard, and we added in cabinets like this, and it makes a real nice upgrade. So pay attention to if you don't have a full bath that's being installed and it's just a sink and a toilet, make sure you ask them just to put in cabinets, and you won't regret it. It's really nice to store everything, and otherwise it can get pretty messy. So one of the things we did both with this newer house and our house in the past was we put a cement sidewalk basically around the whole house, and that has been very good because a number of reasons. One, as it rains, if you have any drip onto the ground, it doesn't splash against your nice new paint. It also keeps the water, you know, away from the foundation if you have a lot of water for some reason, and you know, it's a handy way of walking around. It also makes a nice border when you eventually go and decide to put grass in. So adding you know, a few feet of cement all the way around the house is a very good idea in our opinion. Now, something to pay attention to on floor plans is you want to look at what is already basically framed in. For example, this whole living or dining area right here actually stepped in about 4 feet, and it had a 4-foot covered patio. So whenever you see something like that on a design, it's very easy for them just to push it out flush with the rest of the, you know, the structure, and that way you can gain a bigger living room. And so that was something we did on this house in a few places, and of course that's gonna vary depending on the model of home that you're building. But anyway, something to pay attention to is, where does the roof line go? You know, sometimes they give you, like in this case, a patio, but you know what, maybe you're not going to spend a lot of time outside in the heat, and you feel like you'd be better off with, you know, pushing that out and having more of a dining room. So we're really glad that we did that, and it really didn't cost anything more. They just simply framed the house, you know, all the way to the edges with the walls, and you know, we don't have a covered patio for that, but we're happy about that. Okay, these pendant lights are a very popular thing that a lot of people are doing, and just don't feel like you have to pay for them all up front. You can just run the lines, you know, power lines that go there, and then you can add those in later. We see a lot of people do that. One thing to consider with your television is if you're going to mount it on the wall, you might want to put the outlet already up on the wall where it's covered in, and that way you're not running cables and wires from the ground plugs up to the top. In this case, we had a big entertainment center, so we weren't going to do that anyway, but where you're going to mount TVs is also a good idea.